Hi guys, my name is Carla and welcome to my plant channel, Chlorophyll is the New Black. Today I'm going to do a video that has been requested for some of my viewers, and this is about how to take care of your orchid. In this video I'm going to talk about how to select an orchid when you first go to purchase it, then what about light when you get it into your house. Afterwards I'm going to talk about temperature and humidity, then watering, and finally what to do when your flowers of your orchids wear off and basically you are left with bare stems. Talking about orchids, there are dozens of different orchids, but the most common that we found in grocery stores and also plant nurseries are Phalaenopsis. These orchids are epiphytes. What does that mean? That means that they grow entangled on trees with their roots, and they receive their nutrients in their water because of the rain of the seasons. Since they grow in the undershades of the tree leaves, they basically don't get direct sunlight, and they normally develop in template temperatures, which means temperatures between 15 and 28 degrees. So the best shot that we have to cultivate and have a happy plant is to try to imitate this type of conditions. When you first buy your plant, what I would recommend you is to check your plant because you want to start with a healthy individual. If you do so, then you have way more chances to have a plant that will last long years. For this, I will tell you what is important to check when you basically get your Phalaenopsis in the store. Things to check is that the blooms have no animals in the petals or anywhere around, so no pests. You can also check the stems, and you can also check on the leaves and below the leaves. There shouldn't be no animals, and there should be no spider webs like from spider mites or something like that. This will also help you to not bring any pests at home. Also, something super important to check when you are buying a new orchid is that it has a substantial amount of roots. If we can look into this Phalaenopsis, for example, we can see that the pot is full of green and plump roots. That's what you need. You don't want to start having a plant that needs to be reported that has basically black or very dark brown leaves and they look very papery. So if you are a beginner, I wouldn't recommend you to try to report it right away, because what happens is that when you do that, you stress your orchid. And if you stress the orchid, it will right away lose the blooms and you will basically be left with this type of orchids when probably you bought it because of the flowers. When you did your happy selection and now you have your plant and you take it at home, something to take into consideration is where you're going to place your orchid. A rule that I would apply is that I would put my orchid anywhere that I can actually, without any extra light, just with the light of the window, that I can read a book. If I can do so without forcing my sight or anything, I think that light is good enough to grow your Phalaenopsis at home. If you place your orchid into direct sun, that can be very detrimental and can stress the orchid and set it back. I have an example here of this Phalaenopsis that I actually placed directly in a southwest facing window. Why did I do that? Well, those days were very shady in the Netherlands. I was a little bit afraid because it was winter that my plant was not getting enough light. So I put it there, and one day that actually was super good day and bright sun, in a couple of hours I already got sunburn on my leaf. So you can see this won't go away. This is a minimal damage, but you can also dry out your orchid and even lose it. I would also not recommend it to put it anywhere next to a heater or the stove. With this same orchid, I did the same mistake, and then I put it next to my stove. I told my boyfriend to please be careful, but he forgot. And you can see that here, all this part is burned. And this leaf, well, it's damaged. The orchid, because of that and repotting, got set back. And how I can notice this is because this leaf that should have grown to the same size as the previous one or even bigger is smaller when the new leaf already grew. So this means that your orchid was stressed and couldn't put up with the growth as normal. Something that I wanted to add about light is that when you are giving your orchid enough bright light, it will produce a pigment, a natural pigment that is called anthocyanin. This type of pigment, you can see it clearly here. It's a violet type of pigment, and what it does is that it is produced to protect your orchid from excessive UV light. So this is actually not bad. It's like us every time that we go to the beach. We produce melanin to actually protect ourselves and become a little bit tan, a little bit browner. So this is kind of the tan of your orchid, if you will. So this is totally fine, and you will find it especially in orchids that their flowers are pigmented violet or red. Now let's talk about temperature. I have also an easy rule for that. As long as you are comfortable with a shirt at home, then probably your orchid will be totally fine. I have to say something here because I have some Dutch colleagues that they are perfectly fine with a shirt when it is 10 degrees. Seriously, I am freezing with those temperatures, but they claim to be fine. So just to clarify this, 10 degrees is not okay, especially not for long times for your Phalaenopsis. I mean temperatures between 18 and 25 degrees are the best where you can keep your orchid. Something that I would like to add is that temperature is very important when you want to rebloom your orchid, but I will do a video especially for that. This type of orchids, they normally flower when they feel the change of season, normally in autumn or spring. That means that in those days, the difference between the temperature in the day and in the night, it's 10 degrees or bigger. And nurseries use this type of knowledge to actually rebloom the orchids and offer you orchids that are blooming in summer, in winter, or any time of the year. But I would be careful with that and take into consideration that your orchid will only bloom if it's a healthy individual and can put up with the flower. Because producing flower spikes and flower takes a lot of energy from the orchid, and it needs to be totally healthy to be able to cope with that. Now, best topic and important, watering. The first rule that I would give you is that never water your Phalaenopsis with cold water. So use room temperature water or even a little bit warm water. The next one would be when you are watering it, to me there are two ways to water it, and one is to put water all around your root system, and this is my second rule. Never put water into the crown of the orchid, that is basically where it grows new leaves, or into the joint of the leaves, because this water accumulation will cause that your Phalaenopsis may get an infection, and if that infection gets into your orchid in the crown or in the stem, you will most definitely lose your orchid because of crown or stem growth. So try to avoid to water in those spaces, and if you by accident do, then try to dry your orchid with a tissue. The other option is to put your Phalaenopsis and fill the water till the root system and leave it there for 5 or 10 minutes. This is a very rewarding method to water your Phalaenopsis because all of the roots get moisture and then they can absorb water and hydrate the plant. It is important to, in either of the methods, always drain your pot and empty, if you have the plant into a decorative pot, empty the pot, because this water can also start to make the media decompose. And you don't want that because that will cause asphyxiation of the roots and also growth of bacteria and can cause at the end root loss and root rot. So my third rule would be always drain the pot after watering your orchid. It could be that by any chance you forgot to water your orchid, and you will notice because your orchid will look dehydrated. For example, now, if I want to try to fold this leaf, it would be impossible. I would have to break it. I would snap it if I would try to fold it. But for example, this orchid that is no doubt is dehydrated, you can see that the leaves are very lumpy, and then you can basically fold them without breaking them. This is because this orchid is dehydrated. And the first thing to check is that you are watering your orchid periodically. And if that is not the case, and you are watering correctly your orchid and still this happens, that probably means that you have lost a few or all of the roots that are in the pot, and this orchid will need repotting. Now, how often should you water your Phalaenopsis? Many times that you buy an orchid, it includes a tag, and the tag can tell you water once a week, water once every 2 weeks, and so on. That is not entirely wrong, but the best thing to do would be to water when the plant needs water. And how can you know that? Well, when you see your plant and it is not watered and needs water, all the roots will be silvery or will be kind of opaque, an opaque green. That would mean that the roots need water. When they are plump and have a vivid green, that means that they are actually watered, and you don't need to water your orchid until you see that they become again silvery and the pot looks actually quite dry. If you still have condensation or the lower part of your roots still wet, I would give it a couple of days before watering your orchid. So you would need to let it dry completely before watering it again. So that would be my fourth rule. Now, talking about fertilizer, if you use an organic fertilizer, I would follow the recommendations that the fertilizer company gives you. But if you are using an inorganic one like I do, I would cut it in half. That means that if they recommend you to use, for example, 10 milliliters in 1 liter, and with that water your orchid once every 2 weeks, what I would do is to take just 5 milliliters in a liter and water it every 2 weeks. What to do when the beautiful flowers of your Phalaenopsis already were off and you are left with bare stems like in this case? Well, you have basically two options. One is to cut all the stems, and to do that you can cut them next to the base, but be careful because that is an open wound. And when you water the orchid, you have to be careful enough to not put water in there because that could be also a source of infection. The other option is to just leave your stems, and what can happen is that they dry completely, like in this case, and again, if they dry completely, you are free to cut them from the base. Or it could be that they actually grow secondary spikes, like in this case. A secondary spike is basically, this is your primary spike, and you can see that it already flowered and the flowers were off. This part will dry, but in this kind of knobs or eyes, new stems can sprout, and then you can have for an extended period beautiful flowers in your orchid. So you can cut your flower spikes, but then you would have to wait a season until your plant decides to put again a flower spike. One question that I actually hear often is, what are these stems that are going out of my orchid and what should I do with them? Should I cut them? So these are aerial roots of the plant. This is totally normal. It just means that your plant is just creating new roots, and I would then advise to cut them, because if by any chance the roots of your media get rotten or get affected, this will be the best chance for you to hydrate your orchid and not set it back that much. Well guys, I hope that all these tips help you to keep a healthy orchid that will reblooms every year, and I will do other videos about orchids and repotting. If you find this channel interesting and want to subscribe, please do, and click the bell if you want to get notifications every time that I upload a video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.